Thank you so much for letting me speak at this event. I've really been looking forward to it for a while. So super happy to be here with you all. All right. What I wanted to talk about today is the what I call the developer's guide to the Power Platform. And really my goal with this session is to talk about the Power Platform from the perspective of maybe a traditional developer. So if you do have traditional development skills or backgrounds, this is geared towards you all and how can you best take advantage of the Power Platform and frankly, what's in it for you for learning the Power Platform and integrating with it. So a little bit about myself for those of you who might not know me. My name is April Dunham, and I'm a Power Platform advocate here at Microsoft. So I've been doing this in this role for about 4 months now. And before that, I was an MVP in the Power Platform and did a lot of Power Platform consulting. So if you have any questions after the fact that maybe we don't get to today, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm pretty active on Twitter, and that's my Twitter handle there, at April Dunham. So the agenda for today, I want to give just a 101 on Power Platform so we can level set where it fits in for traditional developers, what's in it for you, how can we extend the Power Platform beyond some of the out-of-the-box capabilities, talk about deployment and governance. We're going to hit on all these different areas today, some high-level overviews. And really to level set here, I know you've heard a lot of great things about the Power Platform today. But one of the things that I think that separates this and sets it apart from other low-code technologies is the fact that it's beyond no-code and low-code. It really is an opportunity for what we call code-first developers, those with traditional programming language backgrounds, to be able to develop and extend across the platform. So it's a holistic solution to create business solutions with application development, dashboards, reportings, chatbots, workflow automation, and all of that. But we can go from those truly no-code scenarios with drag and drop experiences to the low-code side of things, mixing in some formula language, and then integrating with our code-first tools. So why should someone that is a traditional developer or code-first developer care about getting in with the Power Platform and using it more? Well, there's really a few interesting challenges and opportunities that we're seeing. So you might have, if you've attended any of the Microsoft conferences recently, I know that these metrics have been touted in some of the sessions, but I think it's really important to hit on in this one as well. We're seeing Gartner estimates in the next 5 years, there's going to be 500 million new applications built. And that's actually more than all the applications built in the previous 40 years. That's an overwhelming demand for new mobile and desktop applications. That demand, in fact, is about 5 times faster than what current IT departments can deliver. And 86% of organizations are actually saying they're struggling to find technical talent. So all of these unique challenges that we're seeing give us a unique opportunity corresponding with that as well. And that opportunity is to be able to embrace low-code technologies to help us bridge the gap. So that's why we're estimating, Gartner is that about 65% of enterprise application development is going to be in the low-code category by 2024, which is just a few years away here. So it's something that is just going to be used even more. So it's really just honestly a good tool to have in your tool belt to know how these low-code technologies work and how you can best integrate with them and extend. So beyond the challenges and opportunity and the fact that low-code is really taking off, what exactly is in it for developers? Well, with the Power Platform, we really do strive to empower everyone to be a developer, regardless of their background and their skill set, given the low-code and the pro-dev application development extensibility with the platform. So why citizen developers, low-code devs can use some of the out-of-the-box functionality across the Power Platform stack with Power Apps and Power Automate and all of that. Professional developers have the ability to use the tools that we're already familiar with. Like I have a background in C#.NET development myself, so I've already know how Visual Studio works, VS Code, GitHub. I'm used to those technologies. We can actually plug those in and integrate with Azure services and APIs and all of that into the Power Platform, which is what we'll be talking about mostly today. And I really wanted to focus quite a bit on the Power Apps side of things when we talk about Power Platform, because that really helps us to do low-code app dev. And I want to talk about some of the reasons why Power Apps can be a good fit for building an application, say maybe over some traditional, progressive web apps, MVC apps, things like that. Well, with Power Apps, I think one of the biggest things that is a time saver and makes it a good choice for application development is something that we call connectors and the whole connector model that the Power Platform offers. So there's over 400 pre-built connectors right now, and I'll explain a little bit more what that means. But in short, it means that we don't have to worry about custom coding integrations into different applications if we want to use those in an app we're building. There's plug and play functionality that we can take advantage of. Another big benefit too is we have some plug and play artificial intelligence that we can add into the applications we build in Power Apps with something called AI Builder. And that's a series of predetermined, preset data models for the Power Platform, kind of based on Azure Cognitive Services, so that we can do things like object recognition, forms processing, text extraction, OCR, stuff like that. And another big benefit of utilizing Power Apps is the fact that it's so deeply entwined and integrated with the Microsoft stack. So we have those IT guardrails and security with Azure AD and all of that baked into the application. We don't have to worry about security too much because that's all built in. And of course, the what we call the no cliffs experience, the no limits of being able to extend this. One of the things too that the Power Platform tools, they all have in common is you get an integrated low-code backend with Microsoft Dataverse. So this is really more than just a database for the Power Platform, although that is where the underlying data and assets for the Power Apps you create, the flows and all of that are stored. But it's really more like almost like a data platform, and it's a extensible data model that we can have that has rich business logic, security, and integrations built right into it so that we can have even more granular security support for things like solutioning, for relational data, for file, even blob storage, logging, indexing, and all of that. So it truly is a scalable back end that we have to take advantage of as well. Now, when we talk about Power Apps and the Power Platform being a no-code, low-code, and even a code-first tool, we need to talk about what is the low-code, how does that actually work in Power Apps specifically right now? Well, that is with something called PowerFX. It's the Power Apps Canvas app language, basically programming language that we have to use. So this isn't something like a C# or traditional language. The language is actually based off of Microsoft Excel. It's a declarative language that we have to be able to do some logic and functionality in our Canvas app. So an example of what you're seeing here of the declarative Excel-like language in action is with a text input, and you want to be able to extract the last word of that input in a label. So we can use Excel-like functions like the write, the find, the substitute, and the length function and mix those all together and be able to extract out the last word, in this case, in that input in the label below. And with the declarative logic in action, you'll see that as soon as we start typing and evaluate, that formula is constantly reevaluating. So it makes it very end user friendly and less barrier to entry because we have millions and millions of people that are comfortable with Excel and Excel formulas, and being so tightly integrated and based off of that Excel expression language, that makes it pretty simple to get the hang of how to build low-code apps and Power Apps. I mentioned earlier the connector model being a big benefit for building, say, a Power App or workflow automation in the Power Platform. With the connectors, there's several benefits. So there's actually over 500 different connectors now, and these are connectors not just to Microsoft services like SharePoint and OneDrive and Dynamics and Azure, but to other third-party and first-party SaaS services out there. So as you're seeing from this big list that we have, there's almost an unlimited amount of connectors that we have to Salesforce and Dropbox and GitHub and all of that. One of the big benefits, though, with connectors, in addition to being able to use some of these out of the box, readily available ones, are the fact that we can build our own connectors. So we can connect either to our on-prem data with something called an on-prem data gateway, or we can create and develop and register our own custom connectors to maybe to connect to an internal API or system that we already have that we want to connect to. And there's even something new that was recently released called the Independent Publisher Connector Program. And what this does, it gives us a way as developers. If we look here at Power Automate, you'll see that we have a connector for Airtable, and you'll see this little note next to it that it's an independent publisher connector. That means that this isn't owned by the company that the API belongs to. This means someone in the community, like you and I, went out and decided we need an Airtable connector. So they built a connector around that API. They published it and added it to the GitHub repo. And now those can actually show up in the Power Automate experience so that anyone using it can go and consume this API. So you don't have to go through, you don't have to be the owner of the API at all. You can be any community member building the API, and we can take advantage of it. So that's just going to lead, it's a new program that just started. That's going to lead to even more connectors available that we can use for the Power Platform. So many possibilities and an ability to integrate with different systems in the Power Platform solutions we built. And again, saving time for you as a developer to not have to worry about custom coding any of those authentications in the code to be able to just upload a file to Box or to pull information from Salesforce. It's baked in there into these connectors. Another thing that I want to mention, given the popularity of Microsoft Teams, I know obviously so many companies use this heavily now, especially since a lot of us are working from home. Well, another big benefit of solutions that we build in the Power Platform is the ease and extensibility that we have with integration inside of Microsoft Teams. So with a user, we can has multiple clients. Maybe they want to use an app in, maybe they want to use that in the mobile device and also the web. Well, we can have our UI and logic and our Power Apps and our flows, and we can seamlessly integrate that within Teams multiple ways. So we can add that in as a tab, we can add it in as a Teams application, or even create something called a Power Apps in Dataverse for Teams, which is kind of a baked-in method within Microsoft Teams to create native Power Apps and Power Platform solutions. And the key thing I wanted to point out here is the ability within the solutions we build in Dataverse for Teams to be able to use Azure API management. So when we talk about when we want to connect to our own services with those custom connectors, if we're hosting it in Azure API management, which I'll talk a little bit more about here in a second, we can use that in Microsoft Dataverse for Teams solutions that we build at no additional cost. So we don't have to worry about any extra licensing implications. The license that we get, which licenses up for Microsoft Teams, that lets us build these Dataverse for Teams solutions, will include the ability to access APIs hosted in Azure API Management. So a great way to unlock even more innovation and not have to incur any other licensing costs. I really love this slide here because it shows the possibilities that there are with Power Apps specifically to integrate and extend at a high level. So everything from integrating with the physical and the digital world, thanks to being able to integrate with IoT Edge, Hub. There's mixed reality components built right into Power Apps. So if you actually want to build an application to visualize where furniture should go in a house, maybe you're sell furniture or something in your company, we can do that with the 3D and mixed reality components natively built into Power Apps. We don't have to do anything special there. We just plug in the component on the app, and we can start interacting with these 3D and mixed reality objects. We have geospatial mapping and even HoloLens supports. And artificial intelligence is another big area. I mentioned AI Builder earlier and how we have some pre-built models that we can use. In addition to that, though, if those pre-built models aren't cutting it and you need to do something more advanced or something outside of that scope, we can easily integrate with Azure Cognitive Services to bring even more AI functionality into the apps we're building. And of course, integrating with the other Power Platform products themselves, like Power BI for reporting and analytics, Power Virtual Agents for chatbots, and even robotic process automation, which is something that Power Automate offers. And then, of course, the different integrations that we have with the pro dev side of things, like being able to integrate with GitHub to publish out and manage our source code and our application lifecycle, API management that I mentioned earlier, and something called Power Apps Portals, which are a way to create a publicly accessible website basically on the Power Platform with the portal mechanism. So we've seen portals a lot. You've probably used one. A lot of the vaccination portals and stuff are actually built on Power Apps portals. And one of the things to really bring home on this from a developer side of things is to start working with the Power Platform and do some of these integrations. You really don't have to necessarily learn new skills. You can take the existing skills that you might already have and the existing code investments and plug those in as is to the Power Platform. Several examples of this, if you're familiar with TypeScript, there's capability to integrate TypeScript to build custom components, which we'll talk about in the Power Platform. As I said earlier, there's Visual Studio extensions to be able to integrate there with Power Platform, the ability to connect to APIs, use frameworks like React, and there's command line tooling that you're already familiar with that we can leverage as well. All of this leading up to, though, so hopefully I've set the stage for what the Power Platform can do and why you might want to look at it. But if we recall that earlier slide, right, where we talked about the challenges and the opportunities, how there's 500 million applications that are going to need to be built in the next few years here, and we don't have enough pro developers, code first developers, whatever you want to call it, to meet that need. And that's why we need low-code technology. Well, how do we actually accomplish this, though? And it's with something that we call Fusion development. You might have heard us talk about this before. Fusion development really is just the concept of making a low-code development a team sport, which is really huge and something that I want to dive deeper on. So with Fusion dev teams, it's the idea of having low-code developers, so the people that might be using Power Apps, maybe some Power FX, to build applications or workflows with Power Automate, and IT pros and code-first developers all working together to solve a problem and create software faster is really what Fusion development is. So it really allows everyone in the team to contribute and within their own comfort zone. And what makes this really important and valuable is the fact that low-code developers traditionally and sometimes are the people that are closest to the process or the problem that you're trying to solve. So by embracing Fusion development teams and low-code technology, you can create applications and solutions even faster because a lot of that requirements gathering piece is handled already because you have the person that knows the requirements and the process intimately, able to also help you build up a quick prototype of the user experience, for example, in a Power App. And all the developer has to worry about, the pro developer, the code first dev, is how can we help the low-code dev integrate, say, with our internal legacy systems with APIs, or add existing additional functionality, help automate the application lifecycle process, and things like that. And IT pros can help tackle some of the security concerns with DLP policies, which we'll talk about here in a second. So it's a really efficient and collaborative process that makes building applications very seamless. And these Fusion dev teams that we're seeing pop up are really increasing. So we see about 84% of companies right now already have these Fusion teams in some form or fashion. So it's really helping professional developers to fill the gaps and create their software faster. Okay, so at this point, I think I'm going to move on to a little bit more of the details at some of the key integration and extension points with the Power Platform. So a couple ones that I really wanted to make sure I touched on in the time. And the first one are those custom connectors. I want to go a little bit deeper here and more technical on how we can leverage these custom connectors so that we can integrate with even more systems and stuff that we might want to consume within our Power Apps and our workflows. So let's break down more technically what a connector is. All it is, the whole, is a wrapper around an API. And we use these in the Power Platform to communicate between a particular service API and the Power Platform products. So as we looked at earlier, there are over 500 different connectors right now to different services, and we have the ability to create our own custom ones and share those with the community, even with the Independent Publisher Connector program. So the reason why we want to use these is because we can give building blocks to citizen low-code devs by publishing our APIs and registering them with the Power Platform, so that all we have to do is take maybe an API that we're already using in one of our custom coded applications and expose that to the Power Platform so that we can unlock even more innovation and opportunities to build business applications around that. One of the things, if any of you have used the Power Platform and maybe you've used custom connectors or some of the functionality with the Power Platform, like being able to make HTTP calls natively in Power Automate. That is something that we've been able to do for a while now, is just make a direct HTTP call in a flow. So you might be wondering, if I can make an HTTP call to an API in a flow with that action, why would I necessarily want to go down the route of using and creating a custom connector like this? There are 4 main reasons that I wanted to touch on. First being, it keeps it simple. It's easier for you, and it's easy for the low-code devs and everyone to call the service with a connector rather than having to know the ins and outs of how to make an API call. The connector kind of obfuscates that behind-the-scenes information. All the low-code dev has to know is how to add your connector into the app and look through the different actions and not have to worry about the difference between a post and a get and a put and all of that. The other one is reusability. Those HTTP actions aren't really reusable. You can only use it in Power Automate. If we wanted to use it in Power Apps, we'd have to do a special call to a flow and all that. We build one connector once, and we can use that across the entire Power Platform. So it's highly reusable. It reduces that overhead so that, again, I don't have to create a flow just to call a connector if I really only want to use that connector in a Power App. And then better logging and analytics. We have some in the Power Platform Admin Center capability to explore usage per connector. That's really valuable in evaluating how often in the metrics of the connectors that you're using that we don't necessarily have by using straight HTTP requests. As far as what APIs we can create these connectors for, it works for any RESTful API. These can be public APIs, they can be APIs you manage, and private APIs via the on-prem gateway. One thing I wanted to point out too is the difference between a connection and a connector. So the connector is what knows about the API's web host and operation details, whereas when you create a connector, you have to create a connection to it to use it within your application. That connection itself is what knows the credentials and has a reference to the connector and helps facilitate the communication with the API. So just a key difference here, if we want to use this in a Power App, we need to create a connection to our connector, and that is passed back to the web API so that we can consume the information. And when we talk about how we create these connectors, there are a few different ways that I did want to call out. There's a built-in wizard experience within Power Apps and Power Automate to create one from scratch if you want to. But the easiest way to do this is with OpenAPI, formerly known as Swagger, and you can import either an OpenAPI file or from a URL. And then, of course, there's Azure API Management, which offers an even more seamless experience for this. So OpenAPI, one of the reasons why it is more beneficial to do this than, say, doing it from scratch is it removes dependencies and it really increases the agility. It's kind of decouples, basically. So we have an app, a Power App that we're building. We want to have a custom connector that can talk to an OpenAPI document, and that in turn talks to the web API and helps decouple the whole process. When comparing, though, say doing an OpenAPI-based connector versus hosting it in Azure API Management, there are a few key differences that I did want to point out. mostly as far as control. There's several benefits that I'll point out with Azure API Management, but you'll see that OpenAPI is a little bit more distributed, whereas Azure API Management is more centralized. And you have differences in the security layer and usage control and cost considerations and architectural complexity. With Azure API Management, so really it gives you the ability, as I was saying earlier, to create custom connectors and use those across the different Power Platform solutions. And specifically with Microsoft Dataverse for Teams, being able to do this at no additional cost. So here's an example of how it would work. If we have an API hosted in API Management and say we want to create a connector and get employee data, all we have to do is say export, and that exports this into the Power Apps Power Automate, and that creates a connector for us. And it's really as simple as a button click like that. Now all we have to do in our Power App is click Add Data, search for that employee connector that we have in Azure API Management, add it into our application, and then we're ready to go. So we don't have to do anything else. We don't have to worry about plugging in any other data. We just click a button. So that's really a key benefit of Azure API Management here. So it lets you give a central place to administer web APIs. You have different policies that you can apply as well to expose specific APIs publicly or maybe excluding others. That functionality that we just saw to be able to seamlessly click a button and have that create a connector for you, those are really big benefits. And then with APIs as well, I did want to point out that we can leverage Azure Functions. So if you have maybe a single API that you want to call, we can leverage Azure Functions for that, and that's supported in the connector model as well. So now I've talked a lot. That's kind of all that I had to talk about from connectors side of things. There are a few more things that I can touch on here, but I wanted to make sure I had time for questions. So I don't know if there's anything in the chat there that was from what I talked about so far that we wanted to address. I do see a question that popped up there. Is there any marketplace where we can sell our self-developed Power Apps? There is something called AppSource. So let me get that pulled up and I'll show you an example of how that works. So there's a section in AppSource actually for Power Apps. So you can take an application that you built. Now there are some requirements as far as being a Microsoft partner and all of that to be able to list an application here on AppSource. But if you are a partner and have that ability, you can do that and list it here. Another one, I know the question was really about selling, but I did want to mention that there is, if you want to just share for the community, let me go to this, aka.ms/powerplatform/samples. This is where if you wanted to share a cool application that you built for free with the community, open source it and all that and give back, this is a solution or an area you can go to do that. And you see that I've submitted some Power Apps that I built, like a desk reservation template and different components and things. So if you do want to share, this is a great place to go to do that. Was there anything else? Any other questions?
Yep, we have a few more questions. Let me just share with you. So Nashmia Khan is asking, hello, I'm a student of IT. I'm interested to learn Power BI and Microsoft Dynamics CRM. Where can I start from? So can you just guide her about something related to Power BI?
Yeah, so my go-to for this is Microsoft Learn. So we have all these learning paths here. If you go to docs.microsoft.com/learn, and we have great learning paths for Power BI and Dynamics CRM as well. So really all you have to do is search for Power BI, and if you here's like getting started, for example. So these are really well built, different modules that walk you through the ins and outs. There's these learning paths as well that take you through the holistic story of how we can, so you can filter, for example, by a learning path. We can see for a product. So if I want Power BI, I can filter it and it's going to show me all the stuff that I can learn. And a lot of these have exercises built in so that you can do some hands-on learning as well. So that's my first stop go-to source.
Right, filtering is the key, right? Okay, yeah. So we have another question. So someone is asking that PowerFX is a new way of writing code in Power Apps. Is that true?
Well, no, it's actually not new. So since Canvas apps were first born, that's how we always wrote those formulas. So anytime we wanted to do something like show or hide something, that's just the same language, the same formulas we were using. The only difference is they gave it a name. It didn't really have a name before. We're just calling it like the Power Apps, formula language. Now it's called PowerFX. And the other key thing to point out there is right now it's what we use in Canvas apps, but they're expanding PowerFX to be used in other areas. So one example of this is in model-driven apps. They just released the ability to use PowerFX in that language like we use in Canvas apps to do custom commands and buttons in our model-driven apps and to do different functionality in our calculated columns. And eventually, that'll be spread throughout the Power Platform so we can even use PowerFX in like Power Automate workflow expressions.
Right. Okay. We have another question. Like any suggestion or motivation for people who don't have coding background, like the citizen developers that we were talking about earlier. So how can they initiate their career journey with Power Platform? Any motivation for them?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, again, if you already have experience with PowerPoint and Excel, then it's really not a big lift to learn the Power Platform. One thing that I would suggest, obviously, I mentioned Learn earlier, but that is a great starting point to get your feet wet. There's a Power Platform Fundamentals learning path here that's really great introduction to the entire Power Platform stack. Another thing I would mention is the Power Platform Developer Plan. So it's this right here. If you just look up Power Apps Developer Plan, the greatest way to learn the technology is to get hands-on experience. So this is a free plan that you can go out and get that will give you a premium license to Power Apps and Power Automate so you can start building and testing some of the functionalities. So, after you get the initial learn stuff out of the way, I would definitely suggest going and signing up for this free plan and just picking a fun use case. Like for me, I picked a use case where I built an app to help me organize my shoes, for example, and just try building it based off of what you've learned there on Microsoft Learn or from YouTube tutorials, whatever it might be, and play around with it because hands-on experience is the best way.
Great. Okay, we have another one. It's some scenario. If you're given a scenario where you have to automate the existing traditional system, and the users are very rigid. Okay, so they don't really want to easily leave those systems. So what are the 3 or maybe 2 convincing points that you would tell them, and something that would change their mind?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think when we're talking about, maybe trying to convince someone that the Power Platform is a good choice, is the one for me, when I was trying to, because I did custom development, right, in my consulting, but Power Platform really made sense because, say, one of the arguments I made is if you need to make a simple change, like I build this application for you and you decide that you want to change the colors of it. You don't like red and you want it to be blue now, or your company logo changed, or you need to make a small tweak to the text on the landing screen. That's stuff that if it was built in custom code, you would have to have the developer bring back in, have a lot of time. It would take a process, open up a ticket, and it would be pretty time consuming and maybe even costly if it was from a consulting standpoint to make something simple as that and make a change. If you build it in the Power Platform now and Power Apps, that's the great benefit. We can integrate with it as traditional devs, but anyone can go in and quickly change a background color or some text in there, and you don't have to go through a whole process, and it doesn't take that long to make the change. So it's going to be more scalable and easier to constantly innovate and faster to innovate if you build it within the Power Platform.
Yeah. So that was all for the related to questions. Do you have any remarks, April, that you would like to share with us? Anything about the session?
Yeah, let's go to this slide real quick. Just wanted to show, sorry, it's all the way to the end. Just a few things I'll just quickly touch on because I think I've got a few more minutes. As far as components are another big area that we can extend with. So that's the other big benefit, again, of using the Power Platform. You don't have to keep reinventing the wheel. You can create something as a component, say maybe a standard menu control, And you can use that across many different applications and not have to keep rebuilding that. So we have custom components. This is an example of what some of those can look like. And we have a gallery where you can see some of these reusable components that we have as well. The other thing I wanted to point out is just the ability to integrate with Azure. And I want to get to this end slide here because I have a few resources that I think are good. And that explains Dataverse and how that goes. We have support for application lifecycle management, which is great. Integration with Azure DevOps and GitHub. And let's just switch over to the end. Source code tooling. So there's a Visual Studio Code extension. We have built-in testing, analytics. I mentioned DLP policies earlier, so that's a way to, if you're worried about security and people being able to leak data out, we have these data loss prevention policies that allow us to restrict where, what connectors people can mix and match so that you can't have one application that connects to your Salesforce data and then also, say, Twitter to accidentally tweet out information. So that's data loss prevention policies. And this is the resources slide I just wanted to point you to, talking about some of the source code tooling, that connectors repo. There's a good ebook and a learning path that talks about this Fusion development stuff that I mentioned. And then also my YouTube channel, because I do have, maybe if you're not a traditional developer, but more wanting to get started with the Power Platform, most of the content on my channel, a lot of it is just introductory level to the Power Platform, intermediate level, not super into the pro code side of things. So I've got a lot of great content out there for that as well. If you want to see how to get started, I have a video on how to get that developer plan, for example, if you want to start testing that out and different things. So you can check that out as well.
That's really helpful.